All right, so let's talk about getting our data out of an object. How do we access something? With an array, we use square brackets and a number, right? If I have an array of nums, let me just copy one of these. Oh, I've already declared it. So we have nums. And if I want the second thing, it's index of 1. There we go, I get 45. With an object, like with the object I have here called person, if I want last name out of here, I use something similar, or at least one option is to use the square brackets as well, which is kind of confusing. You might think we should use the curly braces. Unfortunately, with objects, the only time we use curly braces is when we're declaring that object, when we're creating it. But then to access data out, we use square brackets, that's one option. And then this is what's kind of confusing. I need to use quotation marks here, first name. I can use single or double quotes, or I'll get last name out. I just need to match what I have here. But this doesn't look like it's a string. We will come back to that. But this is one option. Person, square brackets, last name. That gives me Jagger. Or what was the other object I made? I've already forgotten. Kitchen sink. If I want to get colors out of there, square bracket, colors. Notice if I misspell it, if I do something that's not in there, what are we going to get? Undefined, just like accessing an array at an index that doesn't exist. So colors, quotes, gives me the value. This is the key. I'm unlocking that value using a key, assuming the key is in there. So there's another syntax though to access information out of an object. So I'll go back to person. The first was to use square brackets and then quotes. The second is to use the dot syntax. And it looks like this. Person dot first name, where I don't need quotes. In fact, I can't add the quotes here. I will break things if I do that. I'm not going to get anything. It tells me unexpected string. But if I do person dot first name or person dot last name, just in the same way I would do an array dot length or a string dot length. It's the same concept. So this is another option, and this seems nice and easy, and it is easy. We don't have to worry about these quotes, but there is an important distinction. And to help us understand what's going on, first let's talk about what happens when I make an object. So when I make an object with a key, let's do const years, and then make our object literal. I'm just going to do something really easy. Let's say year 1999. I'm just going to make up whether they were good or not. So I'll just say good. I have no reason to say that year was good or not. I'll say 2020 though. Definitively not so good. All right. So I'm using numbers as keys. These are clearly numbers. 1999, 2020. Those are numbers. When I look at years, okay, they still kind of look like numbers. They look the same as any other property or any key that we've set so far. But what actually happens behind the scenes is that every key we make in an object is converted to a string. There is a little star here. We haven't talked about symbols. They're not super common. Technically, though, you can use symbols as a key and they'll stay a symbol. But everything else is going to be converted to a string. So it doesn't look like a string, but this is a string right there, 1999, the string. So to access it, I can do this, years 1999, good. Years 2020, bad. Now what if I do this, 1999 right there? It also works. Why is that? It's going to convert this to a string and then look to see if there's the corresponding string in my object. So I'm showing this to you because it's important that you understand what we're actually doing here. This is not making a number as a key, or if I made some other, let's just call this dumb, I don't know why, it makes no sense, but if I set true as a key, true dat is my value, and then how about null as a key? I actually don't know if I've ever used null as a key. Let's see what happens. Does it allow me to do that? Yes, it does. Because if we look at dum, these two properties, these two keys are turned into strings. So I can do dum of, in quotes, the string true, and I get dat. Same thing with null. All right, so if we accept that every key is turned into a string, whether it's a Boolean, or looks like a Boolean, or null, or a number, or an actual string, they're all turned into strings, okay? That's the first thing we need to accept. Now, let's talk about the difference between the dot syntax. If we go back to person dot first name versus person square bracket first name with quotes. I cannot do this without those quotes. Just to be clear here, this is not valid. It's expecting, or it assumes this is actually a variable name, and it's not. I don't have a variable called first name. So that's the main difference. If I do person.firstname, just like that, I'm always going to get Mick, and that's great. This is exactly what I'm looking for, first name. But if I do person with square brackets, I have the ability to put an expression in here. So this is ridiculous to do, but I could do something like this, first plus name. And this is going to run first as code. So first concatenating with name gives me first name, and then that is used as the key. Why would you do this? Well, you wouldn't. But what you might do is create a variable. You might have a variable that you're using. So let me show you an example. We have our years demo. Well, imagine I have a variable called birth year, and I'm going to hide it so you can't see what it is, okay? So I have this birth year variable, and if I'm trying to use it to look something up in years, I cannot do this, years dot birth year. Geez, can't type there, huh? There is no birth year property. This gives us no flexibility. It's looking exactly for something called birth year in my object. But if I do this instead, years, birth year, and it's just come to my attention through an error that this is actually lowercase. I wasn't paying attention and did not camel case things. Notice what we end up with. Birth year is going to be evaluated and turned into whatever the result is of that variable, whatever it's holding. And it just so happens it's holding 2020. So that is an important distinction. The dot syntax is nice, but if you're ever trying to use something dynamic, like a variable, as a key in an object, you can use the square brackets. If we use the dot notation, it just doesn't work. Even if I use the correct capitalization here, birth year, which is the same thing, it looks in the object, there is no birth year. What are you talking about? Square brackets, it will run this code first. Okay, so I've gone on long enough about that. I'm sure I've lost a lot of you out of boredom, but hopefully that distinction is clear.